Welcome back, everybody. It's Wednesday.
It's hump day.
And you know what that means. This one is a little extra special. Dominic Lee, how you doing?
I'm doing great. I threw a little teaser out on the podcast Instagram the other day saying, it's Wednesday. The episode's going to be a little extra special.
Right.
But you know what else is going to be a little extra special?
What's that?
That crispy, clear audio.
This is true. You surprised everyone, including me.
And here we are.
Here we are.
Hope you guys enjoy the new audio. It might not even be too noticeable, but we've got a little new setup here. Mm-hmm. It's 2021, right?
New year, new us.
New year, new us. We're so basic.
I know. But hey, embrace it.
Yeah, right. Embrace the cringe.
Yeah.
Triple C.
So, again, it's been a while, it feels like, this whole one episode a week.
I'm done with this one episode a week stuff.
Well, if that's the case, if you're done with it, then boy, do I have some good news for you. It's the last you're going to see of it for a while.
This is true.
And not only that, but next week,
we're going to overload.
Really, starting with the end of this week.
Yeah.
Let me put it like this for all the listeners, for all the viewers.
Listen up.
From January 15th through January 25th, that's 10 days, we're going to have 6 episodes.
6 episodes, 10 days.
Yeah. Unprecedented.
And it's all fights.
It's all fights.
Ooh, that's what gets me most excited.
It's all special at that point.
Yes. Fights are back.
Yeah.
Come this Friday. We got a preview. Mm-hmm. Cater Holloway. We're back on Fight Island. Fights are back in 2021. And I don't want to get too much into that because that's Friday.
I'm just really excited to get into it.
Yeah, right.
But we're here today.
Yes.
To do the first of what I hope turns into kind of an ongoing segment that we do on this podcast, or an ongoing series as we've been kind of wording them as classic pay-per-view reviews.
Yes. This
gives us a chance to really dig into kind of the history of the sport, the history of the UFC or MMA as a whole and other promotions. We thought, what better way to start than UFC 1?
No, what better way?
Yeah,
there really is.
The OG, the original.
Without
pay-per-view.
This pay-per-view, are we where we are today with the UFC?
Without this pay-per-view, MMA in the Western Hemisphere does not
exist.
At least not in the capacity it does today.
Right.
So, yeah, it's a huge deal. It is a cultural milestone. We're taking it back. Basically, at this point, it's been 27 and a half years ago. Mm-hmm. And it's the fastest growing sport we've ever seen. Shout out to the technological age we're in that really helped boosted this sport when it needed it.
For sure.
So I'm just kind of ready to get into it here.
Yeah, I mean, this is class number 1 of our UFC MMA history class, if you will.
Yeah. Good.
And it's UFC 1, November 12th, 1993. Mm-hmm. Noah, set the tone. Paint the picture.
Paint the picture. All right. So, I do want to give a shout out to a couple of my resources I've used to research this event over the years. So, for those of you that really want to learn more about this event and how it came to be, because they could probably describe it even better than I can, check out the Joe Rogan Experience podcast, the episode with Big John McCarthy. Also, 30 for 30. So that's like the sports documentaries that ESPN does.
You told me this today.
Yeah. So ESPN does 30 for 30 documentaries. If you are into that, like into sports docs or ESPN, you probably heard of them. They've done documentaries like O.J. Simpson Made in America. They did, the Bo Jackson.
Ric Flair one.
The Ric Flair. They've done it over so many. A lot of people think like The Last Dance was. It technically wasn't.
Yeah, that's true.
But it was like under the same kind of group of people.
It
just wasn't a 30 for 30.
It was
branded.
a 10-part series.
So, 30 for 30 does podcasts, though. That's something that a lot of people don't know. And you can listen to them on Spotify. And I've listened to one that was about UFC 1. And it was actually really cool. It's like an hour long, so it's pretty brief. Pretty much just hits. It goes in depth though, because it's really about mostly the lead up to UFC 1. So you really go in depth there. But check out those if you want to learn more. But this event did happen, as you said, November 12th, 1993, at McNichols Sports Arena in Denver, Colorado. 7,800 people in attendance. 86,000 pay-per-views sold. Now,
that was a shocking number to me. It really was.
So 86,000 in today's standards is nothing.
Right.
For comparison, the biggest pay-per-view the UFC had in 2020 was UFC 251, Masvidal versus Usman. That sold 1.2 million.
Yeah.
If you want to go even a different comparison, Stipe versus Cormier 3, I believe, was around 500,000. So, needless to say, it's a big drop off from that. But at the time, this completely blew away any and all industry expectations.
I would have loved to have seen all of the promotional aspects going into this event, like what all it was like on TV and like commercials, magazines. I'm sure in the 90s, newspapers even. Right. I would have been interested to see that.
Yeah. So how this event really came to be is there's two individuals in particular I'll focus on, Rorion Gracie and Art Davie. So Rorion Gracie, some of you might be tipped off by the last name. He is the father of Hoist Gracie, Hickson Gracie. He is in that Gracie Jiu-Jitsu lineage, that family.
He is Jiu-Jitsu.
Yeah. So he's the son of Helio Gracie, who's kind of looked at as like the OG Gracie when you're talking like Jiu-Jitsu. So, he's that second generation guy there. So basically what happened is in the 80s and even in the 90s, the Gracie family was already making kind of a splash on VHS. VHS was very new at the time. So they were doing this thing called the Gracie Challenge. It was these VHS tapes they would release. Essentially, they're all from Brazil, the Gracies, and they were very much masters of Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. And as they called it, Gracie Jiu-Jitsu. It was like their own little spin on it, right? So they would come over to America and I'm sure they went to other countries. They would go to these local gyms, whether it was like karate fighters or kickboxing gyms, boxing gyms, whatever, wrestling gyms. Mm-hmm. And they would challenge anybody there. And the whole gimmick was that if you beat one of the Gracies in a grappling match or just in a match, whatever you want to call it, they would give you $1 million. That was the selling point. It was like, if you win, you get $1 million.
And that was their confidence level.
And I could tell you how confident they were because they did not have $1 million to give.
Exactly.
Which is the point here is that they never lost. So they were becoming very popular. I believe Art Davie found out about the Gracie family through Playboy magazine. I believe there was an ad in Playboy magazine or an article talking about this family in Brazil practicing jiu-jitsu, and that's where he kind of began reaching out, trying to learn more about it.
That's good marketing by the Gracies, I must say. You got to look at like the demographic in that day of who was getting these magazines.
Right.
And it's essentially the same demographic that was going to watch these events, combat sports. Wow.
So,
What a play.
Yeah, exactly. The Gracies, they were very smart, So Art Davie was a promoter. And this was what he was looking to... He really wanted to build some sort of an event where you could... Basically, which style would win. Because I believe Art Davie grew up a boxer.
Right.
And I think he said he was... I believe this is him that said this. So if I'm wrong, again, you can watch my resources I told you about. And I know it's in there somewhere. I believe he grew up a boxer. And he was a kid that was always at the beach and stuff. I think he was from California, and he got in a match against a guy who was a wrestler, and he got taken down immediately and pinned immediately.
Damn.
And he was like, "Holy shit!" So he said that thought was always in his head from that day on about if you put all these fighting styles against each other,
what's going to be like the alpha?
Who would win? Which style would come out on top? And that's why he really wanted to get into this. So his way to kind of pitch this to Rorion Gracie was, you put one of your sons in this tournament, and it's a way for you to get your product, Gracie Jiu-Jitsu,
right, out to the world.
Out to America, out to the Western world, It was a chance for them to really grow their name, their lineage. And that was the big selling point. So now you have this partnership, right? And the whole thing was winner was going to receive $50,000. 8-man tournament. Art Davey decided, he gets busy.
Yeah.
Trying to find fighters that would step up to do this.
And of the different arts.
Yeah. So he got rejected a lot. There's a lot of at this time, boxing was king of combat sports, and none of the, a lot of these, it's not like he was going to be able to get Mike Tyson to come fight for $50,000 in a match that he could potentially lose.
Right.
So he had to really get creative. So there was some things that, he was putting a lot of ads in MMA magazines, or I guess boxing magazines, things like that. Really just looking anywhere and everywhere he could to find talent. And you get this hodgepodge group, the outsiders, the Breakfast Club of fighting in a way.
Good way to put it.
So you end up with an 8-man tournament, Hoist Gracie representing Jiu-Jitsu. Then you got Kevin Rozier, kickboxing. Art Jimerson, boxing. Gerard Gordeau, savate. Taylor Tooley, sumo. Zane Frazier, American Kenpo. Ken Shamrock, shoot fighting. And Patrick Smith, taekwondo. So that ends up being your 8 fighters and
martial
styles.
Arts. Yeah.
And I guess maybe I should elaborate, because a lot of people listening, it seems crazy because everybody's a mixed martial artist today. Everybody's so talented in every style.
But 27 years ago, it wasn't the case.
It wasn't the case,
You specialized in one aspect of fighting.
Like my dad's talked about when he was growing up in the 70s and 80s, and even when he got older into the 90s, karate was big, and karate gyms and
boxing. You credit to Bruce Lee, then boxing credit to Mike Tyson.
Yeah, so those are like the two that you would see in America, and then after this event, that's when jiu-jitsu really became far and wide like a huge deal. And then when you went to other areas of the world, so when you went to Brazil, jiu-jitsu was very prevalent there. But in America, most people probably didn't even know what jiu-jitsu was, and that's going to become more obvious when we get into this event. So, I could go on and on, but I don't want to talk, I don't want to keep you guys here all day. Just know that this event was unprecedented, and imagine this. So you have your idea, right? You have this 8-man tournament where you have these guys going up against each other to determine who has the best style. Now you have to try to get this on pay-per-view, because that's where you're going to make your money.
Right.
Well, Art Davey had a very hard time doing that. He was turned down by HBO immediately. He was turned down by all these pay-per-view providers immediately, except for one. No, Semaphore Entertainment Group, SEG.
Semaphore.
Yeah, SEG. They would end up becoming the first. They were like the original owners of the UFC over time. So that ends up being who puts it on pay-per-view, and they were looking to get into sports, so they were SEG was putting on a lot of concerts and
but new to the sports world.
Yeah, so I believe they had done a tennis match between. Have you ever heard of the tennis match between? It was the male versus female tennis players.
Billie Jean. Battle of the sexes.
Yeah, they were the ones who.
No
did
shit, really.
I believe so.
Wow.
And that was the only other sport.
And that was huge.
Yeah,
at
that
the
was
time.
huge.
Wow.
So then this was their second splash into sports. Isn't that kind of funny?
That is
UFC
crazy.
Followed up Battle of the Sexes.
There will not be another fact on today's episode that blows me away more than that one. That is so crazy. I love that.
So they're able to get it on pay-per-view now. So,
right.
Okay, mission accomplished already, right?
Right.
Well, now you got to come up with things like, okay, what are these guys fighting in? And then that's where one of Rorion Gracie's students was a movie director.
This is another fun one.
So he, I forget his name. I think it was John Gilliam, I believe. Well, he directed a movie called Conan the Barbarian, which, for those of you that don't know, was a movie in the 80s starring Arnold Schwarzenegger. It was a very big movie, had a sequel, Conan the Destroyer, a couple years later. He was the one that pitched the idea of the octagon with the chain link fence. Now, if you watch Conan the Barbarian, there is a scene where you can tell where he got the inspiration for this, because in a way, you see Conan fighting these guys in this like structure, this cage-like structure, almost like an octagon before, way back in the 80s, before it had even been considered. So really cool there. Some of the ideas that got turned down, I'm telling you, this shit's kind of wild. They
Pyramid.
They wanted barbed wire around the top of the cage, around the cage as a whole.
Even the WWE hasn't done that.
They wanted it to be an electric fence with a pool of sharks swimming around below it. I'm telling you, if you gotta listen to some of the shit. It's crazy. They decided not to do that because the water,
for hopefully many reasons.
Because people would get, go into cardiac arrest, among other things, if they
eaten by a shark, electrocuted.
The
list goes on.
The water.
There'd be a lot of liabilities to sign in a way.
So they kind of came to their senses and decided to keep it a little more simple, but iconic. I mean, it was.
Look at what they're fighting in today.
Yeah, it was revolutionary. So there you go. Now you have like pretty much everything in place, right? Well, now you got to come up with rules, and this is where you get into the marketing side. There were no rules, according to legend. That's, if you look at a lot of the promotional materials, before it was even called mixed martial arts, the sport was called No Holds Barred.
Ugh.
Which, in of itself, is not a bad name, because No Holds Barred just means that no holds, so no chokeholds or leg locks, whatever, are barred. You can do anything. But the problem was that even deeper into that promotion side was 2 fighters enter, 1 must leave. Like, they were basically like, someone's gonna die.
Yeah.
And that would well, for this event, it would do a lot of good for them and how much they sold, and even for the next few events, it would become a problem for them in the next few years once Washington D.C. decided to start meddling in their business. Including but not limited to John McCain, advocating for the whole sport to be banned. So that was most of the promotion. And truthfully, there was no rounds, so no round system. A fight would go until someone won via KO, submission, or if the corner threw in the towel. That's it. No other way that a fight is stopped. And truthfully, there wasn't a whole lot of other rules. There was, I believe, you weren't allowed to eye gouge.
Poke, yeah.
I actually
even hair pulling was allowed.
So what's funny is UFC 1, they did ban groin shots. However,
they obviously,
one of the fighters, I want to say it was, I forget which.
I think it was the second fight.
I forget if it was Zane Frazier. One of these fighters, I believe, on this card said, if I could have been able to do groin shots, I would have been. That's part of his style. That's what he said. Like, that's something in his style, is like to go for the groin and things like that.
Interesting technique.
Yeah. So he said if I had been allowed to do that, I would have won. So then they allowed it, and then you get into like UFC 4, I think, where Joe Son gets his balls literally smashed.
Right.
So yeah, at this time there wasn't many rules, but there were more than they had.
Said. Exactly.
Okay, so I've kind of done I think I've done my piece there as far as the lead up to the event.
You painted the picture well.
I feel like I talked forever. So now we're here, November 12th, 1993.
Yes, sir. Denver,
now,
Colorado.
I don't know if this is something maybe I should have asked you if you wanted to say this, but this was your first time watching.
My first time from start to finish.
Yeah, I mean, you've seen.
Right, but I sat down the other night over dinner and flicked it on Fight Pass and an hour and 28 minutes, not too long. You know, pay-per-views these days are 3 hours, so I kind of appreciated that.
Mm-hmm. So, sorry, go ahead.
No, go ahead.
Let's start with the commentary team.
Loved it. No,
Bill Wallace, NFL legend Jim Brown.
It was a very interesting cast.
And Kathy Long.
Yes, boxer, kickboxer.
I believe so, yeah, one of the two. And then Jim Brown, football player.
Yes, one of the best running backs of all time.
And Bill Wallace, guy.
That is a good way to put it, yes.
So let's start with, the intro. Dude, this feels 90s.
I literally put that opening intro, though.
Yeah.
With the logo coming in.
Yep.
Then he, squashes it down.
Isn't it sick?
Picks up the ultimate, then it all rises up. Dude,
I'll tell you
that logo to this day is one of the sickest logos in all
the 90s,
sports.
That shit probably was expensive.
Oh, that shit was fire when people saw that on TV.
And, that's going to be a theme for this event. This I've never seen a more 90s event.
This had 90s all over it. It was awesome.
So let's start with the commentary. Bill Wallace, I think it was very clear he was not ready for this.
Bill Wallace was, to put it into perspective, what you expect out of a John Anik today. That's kind of the way
so he was the lead play-by-play man,
right.
What the official term is. But yeah, he is John Anik, or even at times Joe Rogan's kind of done that at times. Or no, I shouldn't say Joe Rogan. John Anik or Mike Goldberg. That was our man Bill Wallace's role here.
Yes.
And I'll tell the people what he did in the beginning.
So, of course, I took notes, right, as always. And, first off, back to the intro, one more thing. They had, as that logo was coming in and stuff, they go, the deadliest fighters in the world. And I was like, bruh, this just came on the TV and we're talking. So that's where we are with the sport. That's kind of just puts it more into perspective, the deadliest fighters, quote unquote. But yeah, so we shoot over from that sick intro into the broadcast team. Bill's doing his little introduction. And literally, as he's saying his name, dead ass, burps. Just right.
He had to give an example.
I had to give an example. Literally, and then just kept going.
Yeah.
I was like, I literally put, did he just burp while introducing
Yes, he did.
Question mark?
Yes, he did.
And then he's like, excuse me. Then just keeps going. It was like that video of the Jets defensive lineman where he blesses himself when he sneezes. Yeah. That's what it reminded me of.
Yeah, he's like, bless you, thank you.
And, shout out to Bill for just fighting through it, but that shit cracked me up, dude.
And you could tell we're in for a treat. The first words out of his mouth, the Ultimate Fighting Challenge.
Yeah.
Huh? Bill.
Take two. Take two. Wait, we're on live TV.
So it's obviously Ultimate Fighting Championship, and just to be clear, it's always been the Ultimate Fighting
always has, yes.
Championship. Fun fact, the original name for this event was War of the Worlds.
Ooh.
And they changed it. Yep. Not sure why the change happened, but they were originally pitching it as War of the Worlds when they were looking for fighters. That was the...
I like that, though.
That was kind of the name. But, so that was a side point. But Ultimate Fighting Challenge. And when I watched it again, I was like... I rolled my eyes. I was like, God, fucking Bill Wallace, man. What is going on here? Now, all respect to Bill Wallace. I mean, what you're going to find as we go through this is nobody was really prepared for what happened this night.
No. I mean, they didn't know what to expect. They didn't even know anything about the sport.
They didn't know most of these fighting styles, and they're trying to call these fights. This isn't just a boxing match or a wrestling match.
So we're not, shitting
these
on
aren't
them.
guys these guys are not specialized. You have Jim Brown, who, all the respect in the world, that's probably one of the best Cleveland Brown of all time, and I'm not a Browns fan, and you're not either, but we're from Ohio.
Yeah,
a lot of respect for Jim Brown. That dude's a legend.
Yeah.
So it's just cool to see him, and I don't think he did a bad job, but he's not the most special, the most accredited person
would have been Kathy.
It's Kathy Long, and she has the least to say.
Yeah, they hardly let her talk.
Yeah. So again, a bit of a shaky start for Bill Wallace.
The burp, though.
Yeah.
If you're not going to watch this whole pay-per-view, just watch the first 2 minutes and you'll be so entertained.
So, yeah, I guess we'll get into kind of our first fight ever.
Yeah, ever.
In UFC history.
And we have a 420-pound sumo wrestler.
Named Taylor Tooley. going up against a Savate fighter from
the Netherlands that weighed
Netherlands.
216 pounds.
Yes, and he looked like your uncle who just got out of prison, Gerard Gordeau.
Yes.
And honestly, he probably was your uncle that just got out of prison because this man is a fucking savage. Before we talk about the fight itself, his biggest claim to fame before this was that, or maybe it was after this fight, I can't remember, but I believe over in Japan or it was in some other country, he was fighting a Japanese fighter, and he eye gouged the shit out of him until it permanently blinded him in the eye. So that guy was never able to fight again. So Gordeau, shaky character at best. There's even stories in that 30 for 30 where, they were talking about like when you went backstage and you see the fighters just kind of hanging out. They said Gordeau was just chain smoking cigarettes before the event started. So here you go. You get this first match and you don't know what to expect. You're just kind of holding your breath. Everybody's holding their breath, right? So what do you see? Taylor Tooley charges,
and
Gordeau literally like a matador.
So Taylor, is that how you say it? Taylor Tooley charges in, essentially kind of falls down. Gerard kind of gets out of the way.
Gerard does the matador thing.
Yeah, that's exactly what it was. And as Taylor's trying to get up, Gerard kicks the shit out of his face. It looked like a kicker kicking a field goal. Mm-hmm. This was, by the way, Taylor was grounded at the time. No rules here.
Yep.
Kicked him so hard his teeth fell out of his mouth.
His tooth flew into the crowd.
Yeah. So someone's got that, I'd imagine. It's probably worth a lot of money these days. And then Gerard follows it up with a vicious right hook. Again, no gloves, bare knuckle. Right to the eye, cuts Taylor open real bad. The ref don't know what to do. He's like, is the fight over? Or can we pause and take a timeout?
The ref has no idea.
I didn't know what was going on. His corner starts checking on him, but they didn't throw in the towel. Mm-hmm. It, again, shows like no one knows what they're doing at all.
So you see this like awkward pause.
Yeah.
Taylor Tooley's done.
He has no idea
eating already.
Oh, yeah. It's bad.
Gordeau got really fucked up by those two shots, too. The tooth with his foot was cut.
Yeah.
And then the punch broke his knuckle.
Yeah. So
he was hampered for the rest of the night, pretty much.
Yeah, we'll talk about his hand later because it swells up like a balloon.
Yeah.
And a Conor McGregor voice.
So I forget the referee's name here, but he was actually a good choice for UFC 1. MMA on Point has done a video where he was... they talked about him in it, and I can't remember that video off the top of my head, but I just want to give them the shout. So basically, he ends up stopping the fight, which goes against what the whole point was of you don't stop a fight unless knockout, submission.
I will say I thought he was knocked out, but then he was still there.
Yeah, so it's, again, I agree, but this is 1993. Right. And because of that stoppage, the way that went, that was one of the reasons John McCarthy got the job for UFC 2 and therefore became
one of the best refs of all time.
Because he was a Gracie student.
Mm-hmm.
He was a cop in Los Angeles at the time. Huge guy, by the way, John McCarthy. That's what they call him, Big John McCarthy. And he wanted to actually fight in the event, but they didn't want more than one representative of jiu-jitsu, so he became the ref.
Imagine.
Because they said, you cannot stop it like this. You have to let it go until corner throws in a towel, knockout, submission, and that be it.
But nevertheless, the fight did end. There was no more that happened.
It went 26 seconds, by the way. That's going to be a theme here. No fight.
Went longer
no
than
fight went far more than
2.5?
4 minutes, 20 seconds. So think about in today's terms, we have the round system, 3 5-minute rounds or 5 5-minute rounds. And this event had no rounds. Well, no fight went a full 5 minutes. So this would end up becoming a problem for the UFC later, especially when they started doing super fights. You had fights going a half hour and nothing happening in them, and it became bad. But in this event, they were like, shit, man, we never need to put in any rounds. Like, look at this. But that, Gerard Gordeau, Congratulations, bud.
Advances to the semifinals.
Advances to the semifinals. So now, Kevin Rozier, Kickboxer.
What a guy. Love this guy. What a character.
Zane Frazier, American Kempo. Funny story about Kevin Rozier. He is a very pasty, chubby white man. Now,
from Buffalo, I think,
yeah,
too.
And when they were looking for fighters, he reached out to Art Davie wanting to be put in this event.
Yeah, he had just retired from kickboxing.
Yeah, and he sent pictures of himself, but he was like cut, lean. And they're like, oh, he still looked like that. And he's like, yeah, I'd probably put on maybe like 10, 20 pounds or so, but, still that guy. Yeah. And then he showed up weighing like 70 pounds more than the picture.
Yeah, he was about 260.
And I think in the pictures he was like 180. So, you get this matchup here, and I'll let you talk a little bit about this because you seem to like Rozier quite a bit.
This was kind of the shit sandwich fight of the night.
Yeah, it was definitely
They both got super exhausted. Yeah. And really, Kevin just ended up being able to get that TKO finish. Zane's corner threw in the towel, though, as you mentioned to me earlier. Yeah. There's really not many takeaways from this fight.
I remember
not
Rozier, I believe he was the one that he was like stomping Frazier in the head when he had him against the cage.
Yeah, dude, that was brutal. And, they pressured each other a lot, but they just got so exhausted to where it's just like,
Yeah, so Zane Frazier had some sort of condition, and his wife was in his corner. So he had some sort of condition. I don't know if it was a heart condition, breathing condition, one of the two. Well, Colorado's at altitude. So I guess when he was walking out for his fight, all the fighters in their walkouts, you can see this, they have like, what do you call it, like a smoke machine?
Yeah, like a fog maker.
So I guess Frazier comes into the cage and he says that he immediately feels like he's struggling to like breathe. So he goes, oh no, this is going to be rough.
Yeah. And they're in Denver, by the way, mile high, at altitude.
So then fight happens. When they threw in the towel, Frazier said like he literally couldn't breathe. Yeah. So he credits his wife for saving his life that night. So can you imagine? We could have potentially seen a fighter die in the octagon.
The UFC would have never happened again.
Yeah. So, just another thing to think about. But I guess not too much to take away here, right?
Nah. Kevin Rozier advances.
Kevin Rozier advances. Now is where we get into some more interesting stuff here. We got Hoist Gracie representing Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu going up against Art Jimerson, the boxer.
The striker versus grappler, Noah. Way back in 1993.
Yeah, so this match is very infamous, famous, all in one. It's very, you can find like really cool pictures of these two like standing off. Let's start with this. Hoist Gracie wasn't the first choice to be the representative for the Gracie family. His older brother, Hickson, was a much larger, he was the much better jiu-jitsu fighter. He was bigger, he was stronger, he was better. So that's who Art Davie wanted to represent BJJ at this event. Well, Horion, being the genius he was, said, no, I want Hoist to. Mm-hmm. And the whole point being that he didn't want, like a guy like Hickson, he would look not too out of place when you had him up against Ken Shamrock. Right. He was a built, lean guy.
They wanted a smaller guy to go in and kick the big guy's ass.
Small, unimposing, someone who looked like you could just pluck
like
off
they
the street.
stood no chance. Yeah. The fans there would think,
they saw this little guy in his gi, and he, as we'll get into, he dominates
everybody.
On the other end of this fight, you have Art Jimerson, who made the very infamous, interesting choice of he wore one boxing glove
on the left hand.
Yeah. And his reasoning for this was that he wanted to have a free hand to grapple with, but that he also wanted one hand to be in a glove because he didn't want to break his knuckles.
It just didn't work for him.
It didn't work out.
I did wanted to point out as well, it was noted that Hoist was coming into this with a Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu record of 51 wins and 1 loss.
And I'm pretty sure all the records that get talked about on this card, I'm pretty sure this is the only one that's true.
Yeah, we'll talk about one next that's quite comical.
Yeah, so...
But Hoist Gracie, showed the world what Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu is.
Yeah.
It was just phenomenal watching him, how just so smooth and just so easy, so smart, the transitioning right into submissions just like it's nothing. No one knew what to do. The way he just got straight to the full mount, never even threw one strike in any of the fights out of 3 fights. Just beautiful, man. And it's just, even the levels that it's improved since then is miraculous. But even that level of jiu-jitsu that he had then, 27 years ago, would still be so successful today.
Yeah.
That's how good he was, and this family as a whole.
Yeah, no, 100%. I mean, we way back in our Mount Rushmore episode, he was the only guy that we both had on our Mount Rushmore. He is the reason jiu-jitsu, the biggest reason that jiu-jitsu became such a major player in mixed martial arts, and it's one of the most necessary skills, I would say, fighting style-wise, that you need to have. You can argue and debate if it's the biggest or whatever, but having that jiu-jitsu base is so important when you get into grappling, and it's just been proven time and time again. But it started here.
Yeah.
So he very smart. I don't know how they matched up these first round matchups, but putting him against a boxer was probably very smart.
Yeah. So I mean, follow us along here as we go over Gracie's tournament. Fight number 1 against a boxer, check mark. Just keep that in mind as we go through the progression.
And the fact that boxing was the most well-known combat sport in America, most people probably saw Art Jimerson, they're like, he's going to win.
Yeah.
We're probably like, why is he wearing one glove? But they probably were thinking he was going to win. Basically, Gracie took him down, got that top mount, and Jimerson, not knowing what was even going on, just tapped.
Yeah, by the way, the refs knew no idea what a tap out was.
Yeah, they
had no fucking
They let people just hold on to shit forever, and
then they would be like, they would like check with Hoist, like, what was that?
And Hoist would be like, he tapped
out.
And they're like, oh, okay.
But meanwhile, Hoist would like still be on top, like holding in the choke just in case.
Yeah.
It was I literally put like, Ayo, WTF, the tap though, like the fight just wouldn't end. It was weird.
So Jimerson taps. Gracie moves on to the semifinals.
Yes.
And then our last of our first round matchups here, Ken Shamrock, the shoot fighter, going up against Patrick Smith, Taekwondo. These are 2 of my favorite guys from these early UFC days. When I've watched the really early events, I just love these 2 guys. Patrick Smith, not a super well-known guy, but he was actually the crowd's favorite. He was from Denver, Colorado.
From Denver, the place went nuts.
The place went nuts. And,
hey, here's the stat, by the way. They listed Pat Smith. I about shit myself when they said this. I rewinded because I thought I heard the stat wrong. 250 wins. 250. That's a quarter of 1,000.
Right.
0 losses in Taekwondo. I took a double take eating my dinner. Like I said, I literally rewinded. Like, huh?
Yeah. So now's the time.
So tell me the story you told me though.
So, again, Art Davey, he's a promoter, right? So his point's to sell these fights. But when he's trying to find these fighters, he's being turned down by a lot of guys who are actually like legitimate.
Legit. Yeah.
And not that these guys here aren't legitimate. It's just what he ended up doing was, he basically asked each guy, okay, what's your record? And whatever they told him...
We'll mention it on the broadcast.
Whatever they told him is what he went with.
Yeah.
So when Patrick Smith says, I'm 250-0, he said, all right.
That's a pretty good record.
So people at home see that and they go, oh, shit.
Hey, that's what I did.
Patrick Smith's a Taekwondo killer.
And the Kung Fu Panda.
And he's going up here against Ken Shamrock, who was probably the favorite to win this whole thing.
Built like a Greek god.
Yeah, built like a statue. I mean, the dude was...
He had just like that... like, the crowd saw him and they were just like, oh, love this guy. He'd been traveling over to Japan once a month and competing.
Yep.
And beating everyone. Really, he was, out of all 8 of them, the second most well-rounded martial artist.
Yeah.
Him and Hoist.
Yeah, like, honestly, he might have even been more
well-rounded than Hoist.
Hoist. I mean, Hoist was legitimately all jiu-jitsu.
Right.
I mean, Ken Shamrock's style shoot fighting is essentially shoot fighting in a way is kind of what we now... It's not, but at this time, it's what today would be a mixed martial artist going up against a boxer. You know, Shamrock had... It was like a lot of fighting styles in one.
Yeah.
He was fighting in a promotion called Shudo in Japan. Bas Rutten, Gary Goodridge, you know, a lot of these guys fought over in Shudo. His brother Frank Shamrock fought there. And it was, I mean, it was kind of where MMA really took off in Japan at first was Shudo. So here you have this matchup. What did you think of this?
Yeah, was this the longest fight?
It was 1:49 seconds, so it wasn't the longest.
Yeah, so I mean, they get to the ground, and they're in a weird... It looked like a figure 4 leg lock. Shout out Ric Flair. So they're kind of just chilling. Pat's trying to get up, but can't really get up because Shamrock has his legs locked up. Eventually, he's able to twist that heel and does a heel hook.
Yeah.
And Pat Smith, the grimace on his face and the pain he was in, taps out. Again, the ref had no idea what was going on. He was just screaming in the middle of the octagon, slamming the canvas. Ken gets the win. They have that cringe stare down at the end of the fight. Ken's known for his fair share of cringy things.
Yeah.
And they try to like fight again, and the announcers are like, "Oh, they're gonna do it again." The crowd's going crazy, and nobody knows what's going on at all. But yeah, Shamrock really showed because he even came out, you know, had the good boxing stance almost and everything. He's got the wrestling like Speedo on.
Yeah.
Because he was a WWF. He did pro wrestling.
Yeah.
Right?
So he would move on to do pro wrestling in the late '90s.
Right. So it was just cool to see, you know, where they all start, and he dominated the fight. I mean, he didn't get. He got kicked while they were on the ground and cut below the eye, but outside of that, really didn't even get touched. So.
Yeah, and Patrick Smith, you know, I do want to give him some respect. If we ever have a chance to break down like UFC 2 or I think UFC 4 or 5, one of the two he's in, that dude was actually, like, he doesn't get a lot of, he didn't fight very often in MMA. You know, I'm pretty sure after these UFC events, he really didn't do it too much more. But he was actually a guy who was a step above some of these, you know, he wasn't, you know, he was a step above an Art Jimerson or a Kevin Rozier or Zane Frazier. He didn't really get the show that here. He would have some awesome moments, though, in his later UFC fights, and maybe some day down the line we'll get to those. I just want to give some respect to Patrick Smith. It was cool, you know, he's from Colorado. You could tell that the crowd loved him, and I'm a Patrick Smith fan from watching these early events, so I enjoyed seeing that. But, of course, Ken Shamrock, the man, he moves on to the semifinals.
And the semifinals are set.
So we got Gerard Gordeau going up against,
Rozier.
Right, Kevin Rozier. I couldn't remember for some reason if Rozier had to be replaced or not, but no, okay. And then Hoist Gracie, Ken Shamrock. So we'll start with Gordeau, Rozier.
One thing. Okay. I wanted to mention this. This was part of the broadcast. While we were waiting for the semifinals to begin, they cut over to the three commentators, and what was it? The other guy, Bill and Jim, and then what was the third gentleman on the broadcast booth?
You said Bill
and Jim, and then what was the third guy?
Third guy?
Yeah.
I have Kathy Long, but...
Oh, there was another guy.
There was another... I don't have his name.
Like, snuck in every now and again.
I think it was Rod Machado.
Yeah.
That was additional analysis.
Yes.
He wasn't a part of... Yeah.
That's him. And I wanted to point this out. So they kind of cut over while we're waiting for the semis to start. And he essentially is talking about the last two fights that had happened, which was Shamrock and Hoist Gracie. Both fights taking place all on the ground. And he goes, yeah, we really got to see, you know, how good these fighters actually are, and how the other fighters basically just aren't prepared for that groundwork and yada, yada, yada. But he's like, yeah, I'm just, it's not too appealing to watch. And I just thought that was interesting to point out because, you know, I was like, even in 1993, you know, folks thought that grappling was boring. I mean, the broadcasters even brought it up, and I just thought that was an interesting thing I wanted to note.
these guys, they had no idea
right.
what was going to happen with this event. They thought it was kind of just a flash in the pan.
Yeah.
They didn't even know it was going to be as big as it was. They didn't know it was going to sell 86,000 pay-per-views and lead to UFC 2, which I believe even sold more than that. So, it's just so interesting to see what some of these early people, the commentators are really the ones you're listening to and you're going, oh, that's what they thought of that.
Yeah, and the best part about doing these reviews in general, but especially UFC 1, is just seeing this and then where we are today. It's just crazy that it's even the same organization in the same sport, Yeah. So there's just so much to compare and contrast, and I thought I wanted to bring that up because, you would never hear a commentator say it in the way he said it today.
Yeah.
You've heard guys like Joe Rogan be like, a lot of people think that, the grappling's boring, but if you really look at it, it's so beautiful technique and blah, 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 and he advocates for it. But then they're just like, yeah, it's not that appealing to watch. I thought that was fascinating.
Yeah. So now we're in Gordeau, Kevin Rozier. What were your thoughts here? This fight was very quick. It was 59 seconds.
Kevin was just so exhausted from that first fight. There was nothing left in him. So Gerard TKO'd him relatively easy. What was the time on that?
59 seconds.
59 seconds. I mean, there wasn't a lot of takeaways here. This is when Gerard, they zoomed in on his hand. It was swollen up real bad from the punch to Taylor's eye in that first fight. But yeah, I mean, his striking was very good. I'm not going to take anything away from Gerard. But Kevin was so just done.
Yeah.
When he got hit by the first shot, you just knew he was ready to be done. I will say, going in, or after that fight, they did a freaking interview with Kevin. You never see interviews with the losers. Well, you don't see them as often.
Right.
But this, they did 2 back-to-back losers, which I thought was fascinating. We'll talk about the next one. And Kevin is just such a great character and fun guy, humble in defeat, giving shout-outs to everybody. He's like, yeah, I accepted this on 3 weeks' notice. He's basically the 1993 version of Khamzat Chimaev, And he's like, yeah, I just came in here. The altitude got to me. His coach is hyping him up in the background, and it was just a really cool interview, really cool guy. He's a guy I'd want to drink a beer with, Kevin Rozier. So shout out to Kevin. But yeah, Gerard dominated what was to be dominated in that fight, I guess.
And so Gordeau
makes it to the finals.
Makes it to the finals.
Yeah.
So good on him, but he is limping his way there.
Yes, he is.
On the other end, Hoist Gracie, Ken Shamrock. This is the OG.
They were hyping this fight up on the commentary.
This is the OG MMA rivalry.
Yeah.
Or UFC rivalry, I should say. Hoist Gracie versus Ken Shamrock. You have, again, jiu-jitsu going up against shoot fighting. And really, I mean, Ken Shamrock was very much a grappler. He knew a lot of submissions in comparison to, guys like Mark Coleman or Dan Severin. He actually knew a lot of submissions, but he was very much a grapple-heavy guy.
Just looked like a wrestler,
Yeah. And Gracie, obviously, jiu-jitsu, all submissions there.
Came out quick in this one.
Yeah.
Took Ken down very quickly. Then there's the transitioning. Ken tried and tried, but you couldn't keep him off, man.
If I have to give a fight of the night, this would be the one, because it was this was essentially the finals.
It was cool. The commentators were like, oh, I'm telling you, this next fight, this is the one to watch out for. We've got the 2 grapplers and so on and so forth. They were hyping it up. So it was cool, and it was funny because they were just talking shit about the grappling and how it's not fun to watch. But then 10 minutes later, they're like, oh, this is going to be the fight. We can't wait to see this one. It's so interesting. But yeah, I couldn't wait to finally just sit and watch all this and to see the build-up coming in.
Right.
Because, again, these guys are going, a half hour between fights? If that. So that's another part that's just so crazy to this. Hoist is in the gi, by the way. We didn't even mention that. Doing the Brazilian train when he comes out with all of his guys.
Isn't that so badass? The Gracie train is
Yeah, that was so cool with all of his brothers and stuff.
Yeah.
So, yeah, I mean, but again, Gracie dominates, gets Ken in a rear naked choke.
It was like a bulldog.
To the side. Choke. He didn't have the full back.
So he was using the gi.
Yeah.
Because basically Ken's neck was so freaking big that it was hard for him to really get a choke on it. He just grabbed the sleeve of his gi and just started pulling. And Ken was forced to tap.
And then again...
And then a ref doesn't see that it's a tap.
Ken tapped
So then-
5 times.
Yeah.
5 times. Big taps. Right in front of the ref. Ref had no idea what happened.
So the ref stops because Gracie's like, he tapped, and Ken kind of is like, no, I didn't. and then that's where they get like pissed off at each other because Gracie's like, no, you did tap.
Yeah.
So then that's where you can see it's just awkward.
Meanwhile, Gracie's still on top of Ken, like one arm under the throat.
And there's an interesting story about this in that 30 for 30 podcast. Ken Shamrock, even though this is years later, this podcast happened in like 2015 or something like that. He said that they wouldn't let him wear shoes for his fights, and nowadays nobody wears shoes. You're not allowed to.
But there were some events
back in these days, after this event, you would see it a lot. You have guys like Mark Coleman, even Chuck Liddell in his very first couple fights wore shoes. A lot of guys wore shoes, and I don't remember exactly. I don't know if they said if you wore shoes you weren't allowed to kick or what. I doubt they did for this event, but apparently they just said you're not allowed to wear your shoes.
Right.
And Ken claims in this podcast he said that was meant to give an advantage to Gracie because he said if he didn't have his shoes then it would take away his balance and it would make it easier for Gracie to win. I know. Because he said, well, Gracie was allowed to wear his gi and choke me out with his gi, but I'm not allowed to wear my grappling shoes. Like, what sense does that make? So I see his point.
Right.
But it just came off like sour, the guy being sour all these years later.
See, that's odd, because then, we get into the post-fight presser. Again, we do another interview with a loser, this time Ken Shamrock, and it was actually a really humbling interview. Mm-hmm. He's like, yeah, the ref didn't see me tap, and so, I could have tried to get out of it, blah, 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 but then I wouldn't have felt fair to Hoist, and it wouldn't have flowed because I was in his choke, and just all this and that. So he was really humbled. Very short-spoken, though, like not a very long-winded interviewer. Not that that's bad. The interviewee, I should say, for Ken. The interviewer was awful. No offense. It was, again, UFC 1. I'm not hating. But, there was 2 very nice... getting the thoughts on the losers back-to-back with Kevin and then Ken Shamrock. And again, for seeing that from Ken, I thought was interesting because he's always been that cringy,
brash,
shit-talking, so confident, cocky.
Well, I think that's why it's never worked for him when he tried to get involved in shit-talking because deep down
he is, I think, like
he's more of a stoic kind
humble.
Of guy. When he's fighting guys like Tito Ortiz, Ortiz, I know himself has turned into a bit of a cringe guy, but if you remember or if you go back and
the freaking chair flip.
If you look at some of their shit talk from their first couple fights, Ortiz was a very good talker back in the day. Just over time, it just didn't seem
it dwindled,
These 2 would fight twice more. Maybe a lot of people don't know that. They would headline UFC 5. And this time, instead of, because the UFC wanted this rematch so bad. So they even tried at UFC 3. Both guys were in the bracket. It was, again, tournament style, but they were on opposite sides.
Yeah.
So they would meet in the finals. Gracie gets hurt because he goes through Chemo Leopoldo, who was a brute himself. And if we ever get into that card someday... Chemo nearly beat him, but he had a ponytail, or a ponytail. Yeah. And Gracie literally would just hold on to that ponytail.
Wow.
So Chemo probably would have beat Gracie. I'm serious. If you watch that fight, Gracie gets the shit beat out of him.
Yeah.
But he can't. he will not let go of that hair. So they were. So Gracie has to pull out of the tournament because he's hurt, and then Shamrock also got hurt, so then he pulled out of the tournament. So they didn't get that rematch they wanted. So then a couple events later, UFC 5, they decided to do what's called super fights, where while they did have a tournament going on, they also would just book some of their biggest names and just fights against each other. That would end up being one of the worst fights in UFC history. Again, this is where the lack of round systems and the fact that you, as a ref, you weren't told to make guys stand up for an activity. It was 30 minutes of Ken in top position in Gracie's guard, and that was it.
Yeah.
Nothing else for 30 minutes, and it even went an extra 5, I think.
Like an overtime.
Yeah, like they just said, just keep letting it go. Maybe something will happen. It didn't. And then they would even have a third fight years later as a headliner at Bellator when they were in their 40s.
Wow, yeah.
And Gracie knocked him out.
Maya the turntables.
Yeah, so interesting careers these two have had, and their rivalry is it's what was built the sport.
Yeah,
really,
that's true.
Early on. But we have our finals.
Yes.
Gerard Gordeau versus Hoist Gracie. Dad bod versus dad bod.
Yeah.
What were your thoughts?
Gi versus pants. Gerard had pants on.
Gi versus pants. Gi versus pajamas.
Yeah. It's just... Oh, another broadcast moment I wanted to point out.
Sure.
So, we were... What brought this up? Let's see what happened. I think they were zooming in. It was about Gerard's foot. How it got cut due to the tooth of Taylor in the first fight. And Bill goes, they might want to check this cut out on his foot sooner than later, because if it happened from the tooth, the mouth is the dirtiest part of the human body. Said that on the broadcast. I lost it, dude. I just thought that was so funny. So I put fun fact of the show. So I had to give a shout out there to that quote.
A lot of fun facts.
That was so funny when he's Bill. Man, if you're listening, what a freaking.
I love you.
Yeah, just fantastic. The burp and all. So the mouth is the dirtiest part of the human body. I don't know if that's actually true, because asses and stuff. But
yeah.
I digress.
Yeah, poop comes out of there.
I digress.
How's that not the dirtiest part, right?
I digress. The finals. The finals.
Okay, so we have Gerard Gordeau.
Yeah.
Who potentially is looking at his foot being amputated due to
dirty mouth
from Dirty Mouth Thule. You're going up against Hoist Gracie.
And it's just more dominance.
Yeah, I mean, it's hard to really even... Once you've set up who Gracie is and his whole involvement with this show, really, the fights themselves aren't, like, crazy eventful, besides the fact that everybody was so shocked.
Yeah.
It's just watching it with today's lenses on, you go, oh, okay, you took him down and dominated him. And
yeah, I mean, in this one, Hoist pressed him up against the fence, eventually lands the takedown, works the transitions again, gets the full back mount, sinks in the rear naked, tap. Mm-hmm. I mean, that's it. He's the champion. And I just wrote, BJJ, Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu is so beautiful to watch.
Yeah.
Even then and to where it is now.
Especially when the other guy doesn't, like the opponent doesn't even know what.
They have no clue what they're doing. Yeah.
So you just see a guy get to do his...
And that's what, when they do the interview with Hoist at the end, he's like, I know that if I get on the ground with these people, I'm going to win. He was so confident in his skill, and I loved it.
Yeah. A little interesting note, he finished Gordeau with a rear naked choke.
Yeah.
And he held on to that thing.
Ooh, he did.
Because,
he held on.
Again, Gordeau kind of has that reputation of a dirty fighter. I believe there was some bad blood there during the fight. Something Gordeau might have tried to do. Like, I forget if he tried to poke Gracie in the eye. Gracie felt like he tried to do something.
Something happened in the fight.
And so Gracie's like, no, I'm going to hold this.
And again with the refs all night, he might have to.
He tapped like 10 times. Yeah, it was very interesting.
Yeah, but it was really cool though, listening to Hoist at the end. Just like, I knew I'd beat anyone on the ground. No one would know what to do, and I would just dominate. And he did. 3 straight fights, 3 fights in an hour and a half. Mm-hmm. You don't see that anymore. I mean, Hamzat did 3 fights in... 60 days? Something like that. Hoist did 3 fights in a night. That's another thing where just so much has changed. Like, that would never be allowed to happen again. You can't fight 2 times in one night, 3 times in one night. Nope. It's not good. You don't know what can happen. But this is how it was. Everybody and everything has to start somewhere. The UFC, November 12, 1993, UFC 1. hard to get through, but at the same time, watching it, you learn to appreciate it.
Yeah, and they gave him the oversized
the big check, $50,000.
Yeah, it was man, what a show, right?
How things have changed.
If you watch this, what's funny is like most of these fights are so quick that like there's really
it's a quick watch.
Like there's really nothing on here that's like a great fight.
No, not at all.
You know, they're all so quick or a little, you know, like the Rozier, Frazier fight's a bit boring, but most of them aren't boring. They're just so quick. Literally, the one I picked to be fight of the night went less than a minute.
Yeah.
I mean, that was the MO of this show. But what a show it was, just for its impact, its significance, and even for the fact that it was, considering there was nothing to go off of, really, I thought it was a very well done show, considering.
Yeah.
If you
it was structured.
If you consider the fact that, like, this is like a brand new concept.
Yeah, no one knew anything.
I thought it was really well done. And even, like, for the shit we kind of gave the commentary team, especially, you know, joking about Bill Wallace, I mean...
They did their best.
He did his best.
With what they were presented, you know?
Look, I mean, you can't really defend burps and weird comments about the mouth. But at the end of the day, like, he did his job, and I don't think he did, like, a terrible job. It just...
Yeah.
He was the one that was given the hardest job to do.
Oh, yeah, I couldn't even imagine.
And then you got Jim Brown and Kathy Long, who didn't really offer a ton.
Yeah, I'll say Jim Brown was the quietest. I mean, Kathy was quiet too, but Jim did give some good tidbits, being that professional athlete background.
That was kind of his whole thing,
you know?
was like comparing it to like...
So that was interesting. They all meshed in an odd style, but it worked, you know?
Yeah. And now here we are, we're a little over a week away from UFC 257. We're about to have our first UFC card on ABC. It's on ESPN. It's
ABC
on Fox.
Network Television.
Even before that, it was on Spike
They're
TV.
fighting on a damn island.
I mean, just look at how far it's come, and I think this event is just beautiful, just because it's a time capsule. It really, it just shows how far we've come, and
in only 27 years.
Yeah,
that's
the kicker.
Yes.
Yeah. So I highly recommend this show to anybody.
You have to.
Seriously, even if you're not, like, if you're a casual.
Well, I'd love for you to share what your cousin said.
Oh, right. Yeah, so my cousin, we've talked about him a couple times on here. He has been a big supporter of us on this podcast, and he even began watching some of these early fights when, you know, just getting into it, when we'd be talking about it and stuff. And one night before we started recording, he texted me and goes, "This Hoist Gracie guy is legit."
Yeah, I cracked up.
And we started dying laughing, because it's just, again, not that it was like wrong.
Right.
He was perfectly, that was a perfect
he's
assessment.
Right. Yeah, he's right.
It's just funny seeing someone in 2020, at that time 2020, talk about a guy from 1995, 1994, 1993. And it was like talking about him like we're watching him.
Yeah.
You know, but that was his first impression. And it's just cool to see people kind of get into the sport and have those takeaways. Like, I wish I could have watched this event for the first time without knowing,
right,
having any expectation. Like, I would love to. I couldn't imagine watching this
in 1993. That is, if only, you know.
Yeah. And
it's like with guys like Hoist, all the great jiu-jitsu practitioners we see today, you know, the Mackenzie Derns and, you know, just all the Brazilian jiu-jitsus, the Charles Oliveira is a big one. Like, without Hoist, they're not who they are today. Mm-hmm. Hoist isn't on Oliveira's not on an 8-fight win streak with all these submissions, most submissions in UFC history, and just, it's so cool. And that goes to say for all of the practitioners, you know, the boxers, the wrestlers, you know, DC, the Olympic wrestler, Brock Lesnar coming over and wrestling with the Olympic background. Then you've got, you know, the boxers, Calvin Kattar that we're seeing this Saturday, Max Holloway. We've got the Muay Thai freaking strikers. Anderson Silva is the perfect mixed martial artist. You know, it's just, it's crazy how far we've come, and looking back at this, it's awesome. It really is.
Yes, I highly recommend it for anybody who's a casual viewer or a hardcore viewer. Like, you need to watch this. Just to see how far we've come, and really it's a great show to watch. It's an easy watch. It doesn't go
like I said,
long.
you don't get many pay-per-views that are an hour 28.
Yeah.
So,
but that's it. That was the end of our classic pay-per-view review of UFC 1. Let us know your thoughts. You can reach out to us if you're watching this on YouTube, just in the comments, or
leave us a voice message.
Leave us a voice message.
We want to hit that big this year, 2021.
Tell us your thoughts on UFC 1. Comment on the Instagram, on Twitter.
Yeah.
Link up with us on there, and we'll give those links here in a second. But first, we got to talk about our 6 episodes in 10 days.
Well, now listen, because I'm not ready for this. I know they're not ready for this.
Yeah.
The notepad ain't ready for this.
Well, all y'all better get ready.
I'm going to need a new notepad.
Yeah.
Tell them.
All right.
Break the whole schedule here. We're going to have a post going out. Yeah. We'll talk about that. But
Friday. This Friday.
This Friday, the 15th.
January 15th is our preview of Max Holloway versus Calvin Kattar. That's going to be awesome. Monday, January 18th is our recap of Holloway versus Kattar. Tuesday, January 19th is our preview of Neil Magny versus Michael Chiesa.
Yeah, that's right. Back to back. Monday, Tuesday.
Yep. Thursday, January 21st is our recap of Magny versus Chiesa.
Whoa. The granddaddy.
Friday, January 22nd is our preview of Dustin Poirier versus Conor McGregor 2. And lastly, Monday, January 25th is our recap of Poirier versus McGregor 2. That's 6 episodes in 10 days.
This is going to be the most content-filled, portion of the podcast that we've ever had. Be ready. Be following us on your platform of choice for podcasts, or if you're on the YouTube, follow the Instagrams, the Twitters. We're going to plug them here, but and when we post this on Thursday, we're going to put the links on Twitter. Be ready. Be subscribed. Be following, because there's so much content here. This is the perfect way to just get back into the grind. Ooh.
Yeah. So, Dominic, until then, tell the good people where they can find you on social media.
Find me on Twitter, on Instagram, at DCLE14. Find the podcast on Twitter, on Instagram, at BAJ_MMA podcast. Again, this schedule note just went over will be posted out on Thursday with all of our links on Twitter. If you're seeing it on Instagram, give it a like, share it. Our link tree is always in the bio that Noah's going to talk about. So, big things coming. Can't wait. 2021's off to an awesome start. Noah.
All right, I'll take it away. As for me, if you go to my bio on Twitter or Instagram, at ntbaker_, you'll be taken to our link tree, which gives you the links to all the platforms that the podcast is on, along with the social media platforms. That means the Twitter, the Instagram, the YouTube channel, the Anchor page, along with Spotify, Google, and Apple Podcasts. It's all on there, baby. And again, just the
link tree, baby.
Again, if you go to my bio on Twitter, Instagram, at ntbaker_, you'll be taken to that link tree. But with that, we're out.
Oh, wait. Did you tell them the new addition to the link tree? I wasn't paying attention.
We have an addition to the link tree?
Well, not an addition, but a subtraction.
Addition by subtraction?
Yes. The voice message link is now on the link tree.
So you're telling me I have to learn that whole... You have to
redo your outro. Yeah.
Shit.
Well, not in this episode, but come Friday. Yeah.
I mucked it up right there.
You did. That's okay.
So it's on there.
So yeah, leave a voice message. We'll share it. We want to share we want to build this community. The Below Average Joes.
With that, we're out, and we'll see y'all on Friday.
But...